What's up, guys? Dave Lipson here, and welcome to a special episode of the Love and Thunder podcast. We've got a great guest on with us today. This guy is someone that I've personally looked up to for a very long time, have read his books, a huge fan of his company, and really just an inspirational character. We've got Chris Duffin of Kabuki Strength with us today. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Looking forward to talking today.
So for you guys out there that may not be familiar with Chris, how do I put this? Chris, you wear a lot of hats.
That's sometimes the problem with I don't fit in any boxes at all.
So Chris is an inventor. He is a world record holding 8-time number one power lifter in the world, Guinness Book of World Record holding strength athlete who has decided to, hey, let's see if we can back squat and deadlift 1,000 pounds, ... for reps. And also an entrepreneur, a mentor. I mean, you do so many different things. And Chris, I mean, I think a great place to start, just to give these guys some context, is, if we're starting like Quentin Tarantino in the end, and be like, here's this guy that's done all these incredible, things. But take me back to the beginning, man. How did you become the man that you are? And tell us a little bit about this really inspirational story that I read about in your book about, not every story has a beginning. And what do we say? It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And you certainly did not have the easiest start.
Definitely had a different scope, I'll say, of life arc than most people in that aspect. So yeah, today, I have multiple companies. I'm on the advisory board for an engineering college. I'm on the advisory board for the College of Functional Movement Clinicians. So I play in a lot of these kind of different realms. And yeah, I lifted a lot of weights, did all that sort of stuff. But how I got here is really a journey of understanding myself and a journey of developing resilience, strength, as you may call it, in many different realms, and understanding the importance of that and how to apply that. And how that started, one of those early lessons, because I had in my hands one day, 6 years old, I'm staring down the jaws, literally, of most of the answers to life. And also a rattlesnake. It was in my hands. It was wrapping around my arm. And yeah, I was staring at this rattlesnake. And because I was 6 years old and I had been taught how to capture and handle live rattlesnakes, because I lived homeless in the wilderness. My bed was lashed up into the trees and some beams up there. And this is in Northern California. It was a very kind of chaotic and kind of strange area. The Golden Triangle, I think, is what it was called. And later we lived in this place that there's a current Netflix documentary about it. If you've got any questions about the stories I may tell around dealing with murderers, drug running, serial killer, human trafficking, like I personally experienced living in that world with those people and navigating it at a very young age. And so, yeah, that was a very different life. My parents, my mother chose to not be a part of our normal society. She was super intelligent, very athletic, but authority was not her thing. And she said she's going to figure out how to, forge a life off of that. Now, that was interesting with having family at the same time. So I was the oldest. I had a younger brother and 3 younger sisters. And so that's how it started. And so I was responsible for watching all my younger siblings while my mom and her husband were out, tending the crops in the mountains through the day. And so as time passed, I had a lot of responsibility on me very early. We ended up getting taken by the state when I was just after I finished 2nd grade, so between 2nd and 3rd grade, and spent a year in foster care, which deals with the whole aspect of police corruption and human trafficking and all this other stuff I talk about in the book, but it's honestly kind of hard for me to talk about. So usually I just gloss over that a little bit when telling these stories. So, and parents ended up getting us back after that year and had decided not to be in the drug trade anymore and not risk losing the kids. And so we were in Oregon at this point in time, Eastern Oregon, but pretty quickly fell back into this realm because of not wanting to be that. So this time it was mining. And so we were out doing that. I was living in the back of a pickup truck. You know, the whole family is trying to shove into a 16-foot trailer, which is not very big, not much bigger than this little podcasting space, actually. During the course of the winter, where it's got a few feet of snow on the ground, or living in tents. I think I had my tent torn down by a bear one time. I kept the flashlight for a long time. I had the bear had eaten the end of it.
Oh my God.
But so this is my barefoot brand, by the way, is kind of reflective of that.
Yes, exactly.
This shoeless kid running around the mountains being chased by or chasing bears, whatever it may be. I mean, that was my life. And so I had a lot of experiences with living in uncertainty and facing fear, the reality of it, at a very young age, facing death at a very young age. I
think
paused for a second thinking about some stories, and I kind of can hit me. So
this is stuff out of a movie. It's like out of Hollywood, and like
there's a movie actually underway. So
yeah, that's
there,
like
there
I'm
is.
thinking. I'm like I feel like I've seen a show about this one time about these communities that are living in the woods, or a father that decides to go off the grid, and now the kids are living in this alter different dimension kind of lifestyle, and the name of the book is The Eagle and the Dragon, correct?
The Eagle and the Dragon, yeah. And there will be a movie coming out titled The Grand Goals, which is I was followed during the course of completing the 1,000-pound squat piece of my 1,000-pound deadlift and 1,000-pound squat journey. And so they documented that, but told a lot of and interviewed people through the course of my life, kind of telling the larger story around it. So I'm not sure when that's coming out, but I'm told it's close to being done, edited. So
tell me, Chris, to anybody, that would be just such a transformative experience. How did you get out of that? What were the next steps, when you started becoming the man you are today? And I think that those experience you had probably shaped a lot of the foundation of who you are today as a man in a completely different environment. But
and a lot of people, can use a story like that to, articulate like how anybody can pull themselves up, by the bootstraps. And I think that there's some context to that, just like, the context of being able to walk into a gym the first time. Like, everybody has a different baseline level of resilience to start with. Some people can walk in and throw 225 on the bar and squat a bunch their first time, while another person that's going to destroy. And so we've all got those different levels. But what we all have in common is, if you don't, surpass that floor level, that every bit of, every opportunity to take on something that's a little more, as long as you've got that piece to recover, you're building your strength. Every challenge is an opportunity to develop your, skill with dealing with conflict, with dealing with interactions, like it. But just like, if I did CrossFit daily doubles at 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, training for the games, and I don't have the, it can crush you. And that's where like trauma comes in. Right. And so understanding like more is not always better. And just because a person did it doesn't mean that necessarily you can, but we can all leverage and harness the ability to be better and to use that stress to be able to adapt. And even something shitty has happened to you, you can't change that, right? So you can either live and wallow in that negativity, or you can go, you know what, there's a piece of this that I can still leverage and be stronger, knowing that I've overcome and walked through this. And so that's an important thing, because some of us have been through some shit in life. And sometimes, even as a successful adult, maybe you're a businessman and your company's failing, or your boss is on you, or you're dealing with a relationship issue with your spouse. Like, there's so many aspects of, like, stress. It's all the same, right? And so the more that you can actually build your resilience as a human being, and we're not just talking about in the gym, right, but in all these other aspects, is an opportunity, but you've got to manage it to some level too, right? And so that's important. So I didn't answer your question, but I think it was a good time to hit some baseline stuff there.
Well, that was
How
really
I got
valuable because, like, my wife Camila and I were talking. We deal with a lot of people that sometimes market themselves or sell mental toughness, right? And
yeah
it's a catchphrase, very marketable, right? And what we realized is mental toughness isn't just about doing hard things, right? To someone who runs ultra marathons and does these 100-mile races, that doesn't take a lot of mental toughness for them. They like it. They're comfortable with it. They do it. It's doing the thing that you don't want to do, or
yeah
having the experience that you're not
you
adapted to, that tests your mental
yeah
toughness.
yeah
And so,
somebody's doing an ultra marathon, but yet they're avoiding a difficult conversation with a family member, or their spouse, or wherever. They're not stepping into those moments with, like, it's a small thing and you can feel it, like your gut's kind of twisting, and you're turning away from it. You're choosing to turn away from it and going, oh man, I'm freaking tough because you see me crush it in the gym. I'm going to war, baby. Uh, and then you see, like, yeah, in this mentorship realm or wherever, so many people love to push this hustle porn stuff, like, that no matter, if all you got to do is grind hard and you're going to get there, you're going to be successful. And that's not necessarily all the case. It's more important to know why you're grinding and know your values and go, this is why I'm doing that, and I enjoy that process. But for the resilience side, it's being able to identify those micro moments, right? You're not going to just walk up and be able to navigate something massive in life. You have to develop those, just like you're not going to walk into a CrossFit competition and win it because I'm really freaking motivated and I'm mentally tough. There's a lot of micro moments of building your resilience over time, just like there is in life. Going, God, there's an issue with a coworker, or somebody's claiming a credit for a project or whatever it is, and it's like, I want to deal with this, but I'm a little scared, and I'm just going to step away and ignore it. Those are your moments that you can take on, and that's how you grow. It's not by taking on this big thing that is going to, maybe push you over the edge. These are the small things that get you there. These are the little workouts along the way that help you set the stage for that. And knowing and having the confidence of all those little pieces behind you. And guess what? Every one of those, you're actually developing your skill sets. So you can also be very particular about those micro moments that you choose. Going, I'm a person that has struggles with dealing with, conflict. We're going to find some small ones before you attack a big one, right? And keep stacking that up and getting comfortable. Like, okay, I can walk into these moments. I have a trouble speaking in public, standing up in a group. Like, well, take those smaller pieces and just do it, right? You're not going to walk out in front of a stage and do a stand-up routine with your first time, right? Maybe you are, but the better process is to do this and get comfortable. And so how I got out of that is, so that was the opportunity that I had through my childhood, is gaining, even though I had a lot of, let's say, lack of self-confidence in a number of areas, like social settings, things like that. I was constantly changing schools. I was made fun of because my clothes were dirty. I smelled, whatever it was. I was the kid who lived in a trailer down by the river, literally. And, and, so that side of it, but I also had the confidence of, like, all the things that, like, I knew that I could persevere, that I could overcome. because, I was always out there hauling rocks up the mountain, chopping wood, doing like having to set up camp, discovering I didn't know how to do something, failing at it, and then coming back again. And there was no one holding my hands with that. And so that's what gave me the confidence. And so I ended up doing quite well in school, academically and athletically. And then I leveraged that, well, actually, with a newspaper article. I was applying for a number of different scholarships. I didn't go to a big school, so I didn't have like all the, the big things, that opportunities to put behind my name. And I did a little essay about, moments in my life, and that got picked up by the wire service as a thing back in the day. And so I was in the papers all over the Northwest, and a college called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come here?" Because I was supposed to go wrestle at Oregon State, but I didn't get the scholarships that I wanted. And so I ended up getting scholarships, basically a full ride to go to Oregon Institute of Technology. So I went down there on a dual major, and I started working too, because full ride doesn't necessarily mean full ride.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's a big misconception. I mean, even now after they've changed the NCAA, it's like, being a student athlete is not all it's cracked up to be in the movies.
Yeah. So yeah, I did that, and so that was interesting, because a couple years in, things got worse at home, like way worse when I left. So I discovered that I had some sort of like, calming or influence in the house, but things got really bad, and I ended up started taking custody of my sisters before I graduated school. I was also already at this point, like by my senior year in college, I owned my own home. I was working full time in the profession already.
So wait, back up
I
for a
was
second. As a senior in college, you owned your own home.
Well, it was a small community. It was in the 90s. Like, I mean, it was, I bought the house for $60,000, like,
Yep.
I mean, it was.
That's pretty good. I mean, listen, honestly, most
But I had, I
today
came from nothing,
are so far from
so,
having that level of resilience, right? It's really just about doing the bare minimum.
So, well, yeah. And there was a bit of doing the bare minimum too. So not necessarily, worth any bragging rights, because it's not an endearing trait, but I focused on the things that were going to move me forward, and took advantage of the things that could help me get there. Did I try to be the best student? No, I was probably one of the worst students. I was elected the president of the engineering society at the school as a joke. I performed really well. So what I used was my skill set. I'm very good at taking tests. So I mentioned I went to work. Well, I went to work and I didn't go to school. Didn't buy the books. I just showed up. It was engineering. It was math, right? So I could just show up to the finals. At the beginning, I'd get the syllabuses, and I'd find which ones had recommended homework and which ones had required homework. And I would cancel and change classes so that I could just show up, take the tests, and
This
move
all
on.
sounds like working smarter, not harder.
So that allowed me to, let's say, multitask, right? So, and there was a lot of self-discovery, in that period too, of, partying. But for me, that was self-discovery, realizing like, wow, I'm an engaging person. People like me, girls like me. Like, they didn't know my history, my past. I didn't have, so like that fresh, look and difference was a good thing for me. Well, yeah, I ended up taking custody of my sisters. So let's shorten the rest of the story here really fast. Graduated with the highest engineering GPA, went to work, still in that same town. I was actually just like in a window door, like mill work plant, but I had chosen a path of leadership. I'd specifically chosen a job that was challenging for somebody with lesser socialized skills of being a leader, because I saw that as that, right? That's the path that I needed to go on. And then I followed that up with getting my master's degree. At that point, I had taken custody of my third sibling while I was working through my master's degree. And I was chasing my professional career. And next thing you know, this kid from the sticks was a sought after executive. At one point I was starting to do turnarounds. Like I was hired to come in and fix companies, turn around, prep them for sale. Like, so I worked in aerospace, automotive, high tech, heavy equipment, and was a guy that came in and fixed things. And so I was a corporate executive doing that. And I had 2 kids. I had a house with a white picket fence. I owned a gym on the side, and I was competing. This is when I was actually ranked number 1 in the world. I was competing as an athlete, had my shop. I like building things. So I had a little machine shop out back where I built vehicles. And you'd think I'd have everything. And I'm sitting there in my hot tub one day. My kids are getting a little older. My oldest was like 5, 6 years old about the time I was picking up rattlesnakes. And I looked at my kids and I was looking there, and I almost broke down crying, thinking about them being in the same situation I was. And that's when it started hitting me. I had never really dealt with, like, it was just things I went through, right? But I actually seeing my kids and then seeing, like, going, oh, holy shit. Like, that's when I, like, this is crazy. And I really started evaluating where and what I wanted and who I wanted to be. And so that's the whole first half of the book, The Eagle. The Eagle is about discovering your own strength. And so my book is written not about well, you've read it, but it's to help people, drive people on this kind of reflective journey to dive in and, assess your own values and strengths. And that's the second half of the book, is the dragon. And that's the purposefully choosing in this world, who do I want to be, and becoming that person, not a mask or anything, like becoming that person.
I think, Chris, like you were mentioning, everyone has their struggles and their thresholds and the demons or whatever their, the thing they're trying to combat is. And just speaking personally, right? Even in business, sometimes I'm super duper hard on myself. Like, I'm like, you suck. We're not growing fast enough. It's not working, yada, yada. And when you are so focused on that next step, right, where you're just trying to put one foot in front of the other and keep marching forward, sometimes you forget to look back and see how far you've come. Yeah. And a lot of these hangups or these challenges you face, they're stories you're telling yourself. Like it's literally a narration, and typically, on the flip side of the boogeyman, whatever that might be, is usually a great opportunity. But it's hard to see that when you're stuck telling yourself one story. When you're kind of not able to flip the script for yourself, as you have been able to flip the script for yourself. And it reminds me of a really cool video by Jocko Willink, who's another former Navy SEAL, preaches about mental toughness, but actually has some interesting and valuable things to say. He has a video that's
some good things to say around it. I wouldn't put him in the same category as a lot.
Yeah, no, he's not wheeling and dealing like these other guys. But this video is called Good, and he talks about the challenges. Oh, this is fucked up. Good, we can do that. Oh, we didn't get the money. Good, more time. Gear isn't performing as well. Good, we'll increase our capacity elsewhere. But there's usually always opportunity in these challenges. It's hard to see it though when you are so focused on what you can't do instead of exploring what you can do. And that's not just true with what we're talking about with like major life challenges. A lot of athletes tend to fall into that category when it comes to like injury, right? Where they're like focused on like, my back is hurt, my knee is hurt, I can't do this movement, I can't train like I used to. So, I don't know what to do, when in reality, there are always solutions. And oftentimes the injury can be a gift. It can help you learn about yourself, explore different capacities, maybe work in an area that you don't like to work in because you do what you're good at and you're good at what you do, but those things you avoid, you typically are challenged by. So, along your journey with your engineering background, you started to leverage your knowledge and experience into a very innovative equipment company that provides amazing training solutions for athletes. Tell us a little bit about Kabuki Strength.
Yeah. Well, I just want to leverage off of what you said there. So often we need to like do this deeper look and understand more about ourselves. And when you do that and remove like the expectations that you may or perceived expectations that you think people have around you, and have that fresh look of, from your own perspective, and then that environment, the things that are happening to you. So I own my own gym on the side at the time, and I'm always tinkering and stuff, but something happened. I ripped 2 heads of my pec off the bone, off my arm. And that for me was momentum. It fired me up. And I was in the gym 3 days after surgery doing 500-pound tire flips with one arm. And I was just like, this is going to be the thing. Like, having this as an obstacle in front of me is going to drive me. And that's when my lifting started taking off. But it's also when I said, I need to know more about why I had that surgery and this other string of accidents that has happened. And so I started in this realm. I started going to different clinicians, and I wasn't getting an answer that I wanted till finally I found someone that introduced me to a methodology around dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. I'm like, this is interesting. So I spent years, diving through that, getting to know all the instructors, and then I'd get an introduction to people around that, like Dr. Stu McGill, Dr. Kelly Starrett, Dr. Craig Liebenson, who bought DNS to the United States, Dr. Charlie Weingroff, who's like all these like key amazing figures. And I'd talk to them, and next thing I know, I'd be lecturing with them. And then I'd be like, which is crazy. I'm like, I'm into this like 9 months, and I'm like, okay, I'm lecturing on stage with Dr. Stu McGill to 150 doctors right now. That's kind of interesting. Okay. But they were interested in my perspective from an athlete, but also like my view of this stuff. And I started really looking at the equipment as a whole and the overall approach that we were using. And I started having this different lens, because now I was an engineer, a high performance athlete, but I ended up spending probably 10 years, and it's ongoing now, but clinical level curriculum on neurology, biomechanics, all this sort of stuff. And so the lens was very different. And so Kabuki Strength was an output of that. It's equipment that is biomechanically sound. It gets you, it always sounds silly, like joints in the right position, but honestly, having the right length tension relationship of muscles in a movement and being able to accommodate to the variances in one lifter to another, the mobility restrictions, the training needs, all of this, it has a deeper impact as well, as far as like what's happening from a neurological perspective, and getting the right adaptations, the stabilizers working as stabilizers, prime movers, doing what their job. And so that all came around to using equipment that wasn't just like, preschool shoving a round peg through a square hole, but to accommodating to the athlete, but is also sending the right signals. And I often relate this, because I'm an engineer, I like cars, that sort of stuff, but like traction control on a vehicle is, a lot of people think it takes the power from a spinning wheel and sends it to a gripping wheel. No, if you're going around a corner and you're slipping because there's ice or snow, it just detunes the engine, detunes the shift patterns, reduces the force output, so you don't slip and die a fiery death. And we design our bodies the same exact way. So when we sense instability, the body is detuning and depowering and reducing power output and actually restricting movement around said joint. You don't have tight hips from squatting. You have tight hips from squatting like shit, is what it is, right? And so this is really kind of, it became an education company, and an equipment company built around these philosophies. And so there's a lot of stuff that I started doing that, like my transformer bar, for example. Yes, every able-bodied person should be able to squat through a full range of motion. But thinking that means with a center of gravity in this exact spot right here, no, that's not how that actually works. And so if we can shift that around and accommodate for, the 6'9" Major League Baseball player, I work with every single Major League Baseball team, by the way, and about 80-90% of the NBA and NFL, because they're the people working with understand the benefits of what we're doing. But we can now make that pattern work perfectly, and we can take the training needs out of it, as far as like, I've got a room full of players from the Dominican Republic, for example. All I need to do is get them stronger and more resilient. They have high skill level in the field, but no gym skill level. Well, I don't want to damage them by having them squat without supervision. Or I could put this bar in place that actually aligns the pelvis to diaphragm, which is going to create a great loading of the pelvic floor through the diaphragm and this opposition. And then I'm going to get all the muscles to create, as that loads, there's going to be my mind went blank right now. An eccentric loading of that cavity, which is going to create pressure around the spine, create those co-contractions of the thoracolumbar musculature and everything that's going to happen, right? All these things just happen, and I don't have to spend a bunch of time to teach them how to do it and to teach them how to fight around a traditional bar. Same thing happens on a bench press. My pressing bar looks like a lot of other bars, but those minor nuances make a big difference. Like when I introduced that to the Major League Baseball, not a lot of pressing was happening at the time. And I knew from experience, most of the Major League Baseball coaches, about 70-80% of them have had surgery, can't bench, so on. I said, let's go bench. I can't do that. Can't even take a straight bar to my chest. It was over like a 3-day period. I went to a bunch of teams and demoed it. And every single one of them worked up to 2 plates and did reps. And I mean, their staff jaws dropped, like how bad that hurt. Mind you, it's also arced, so they have a 3-inch greater range of motion than a normal bar. They're like,
so you're talking about, and I know exactly.
And now they're doing 225 longer range of motion, no pain.
Yeah, I was in Vegas with Stan Efferding about a year ago, and we always work out when I go out there. And I was like, hey, let's do it. I'll smash our upper bodies. And he's like, I got a shoulder thing. And I'm like, well, we got the Kabuki bar here. It's fine. You'd be fine. And sure enough, we were like smashing 3 plates with it. But
it's subtle little things like that. People don't realize. So it's like the balance with the curve creates the weight below, which creates a stability point. It's like a difference between a teeter-totter, which has a balance point, but it's infinitely perfect. So it's always going to be one side or other, or a swing. Weight, the center of mass is below center of rotation versus center of mass on center of rotation, has an impact, and that has a neurological impact. And then the angle of the handle is different with every position in and out, allowing matching the internal versus external rotational bias of the shoulder, but leaving just a little bit left to still cue external rotation and engage. There's a bunch of little things, and it's mind blowing when you put it together. And it's like, oh.
And I think the easiest way to get it is to actually feel it, like, with these guys.
That's our sell. Like you could sit there and talk about it. People are like, oh yeah, whatever. And it's like, put it in your hands. You're like, oh, these aren't just words.
That's such a pick me up for the athlete who thinks that they're done. Who thinks like, oh, I can't squat heavy anymore. I can't bench heavy anymore. I can't do this. I can't do that. And they may not realize these opportunities. Chris, you mentioned some stuff that has just resonated so personally with me, because Thundr Bro was born from a back injury. It was from my back reconstruction, where I was like, fuck, can't keep doing CrossFit anymore. I can't keep training as I know it. After surgery, I was wondering, laying on the couch for 2 weeks thinking, I've got this, amazing new lease on life. Thank goodness we have the technology to fix the back and, drill the holes in the spine so the canals can operate the way they're supposed to. And I was just wondering how I was going to honor that. And that really drove me into learning about hypertrophy science and collaborating. You collaborated with Stuart McGill, who's also a amazing dude. I read all of his books on back care and all that stuff, and everyone should get a peek at that who's a serious lifter or not. But just to kind of that fire, that ignition, I never thought it would grow into this. I'm sure you never thought it would grow into Kabuki strength, but it opens up these doors where it's like opening up a room where you're like, look at all this shit in here. This is
My
incredible.
whole career and life has shifted as a result of these injuries, and some of them I'll never overcome. Like
Yep.
that's why I ended up quitting competing and doing grand goals, is because my elbows, by the time I'd learned all this stuff, were completely destroyed, and I don't have any range of motion. So I'm like, well, squat and deadlift. And so, but I ended up pushing those to levels that like it allowed me to do something. I'm like, I'm going to do something that's inspiring, that shows you like, the stuff that I'm talking about, the ability to manage and control spinal mechanics, and show I'm not a specialist. That's why I'm going to squat and deadlift.
Yep.
And allowed me to do like this feat instead of like following this box and paradigm of what everyone else, views and thinks that you should do. I was told like, as soon as I quit competing, I was going to be obsolete. I was no longer going to, have anything within this industry. It's like,
I think
very much not the case, right?
Guys like you will reinvent themselves 10 times over, and that's just who you are. It's these things, they're just vessels to express your gifts, your talents, and they run their course, and then it's on to the next thing. And it's a death and a rebirth in a lot of cases too. And I think like that process of reinventing yourself is something that a lot of our athletes have to do, because they're aging out of these old training systems. They're realizing, hey, I can't, continue to do what I've been doing. And we were talking a little bit before the show, and, just speaking to the fact that, as you get older, you need to get smarter. You can't get away with you used to get away with when you were younger. And A plus B doesn't always equal C, meaning what you responded to before doesn't mean you're going to respond the same way to it anymore. And so, working with an increasing level of prescription assessment and adjustment, or adding the precision and accuracy to, the different things you're doing, become more and more important as you get older, especially when it comes to movement selection.
Oh,
and figuring out what movements work for you that you feel confident in, that you can progressively overload and get good intensity out of it, but not fuck yourself up and end up back on the surgery table, or not allow for that consistency.
But I need to do X because this is what everybody says you have to do, is this right over here.
Well, in CrossFit,
these are the three best exercises. How can I not, like, I guess I'm done.
Sometimes it's literally because it's written on the whiteboard that day, they're like, well, that's the workout, so I should do that. And it's okay, to use the specialty bar, to have, you have to understand yourself more and more. And I think like, it is a beautiful process.
Let me give an example here. So my training partner and business partner, when I started training him, was 58 years old, 59 years old. And this is back when like geared powerlifting was a thing, right? So you'd wear a squat suit and a bench press shirt. And so last year he competed at 73 years old. And he beat his 58-year-old numbers without the gear.
Wow.
As a raw athlete, right? He's the strongest now, septuagenarian. Oh, and he's had a double shoulder replacement.
Yep.
And yet he's still trained. Most people would say he couldn't train, right? And the only way that he is able to is by incorporating the equipment and the methodology. And when it comes meet time, he'll get under a straight bar or use a straight bar, but that's not his training, because those cumulative loads, like, here's the thing, like, all biological, all materials, biological or not, have a loading capacity. Okay. Now people argue, well, biological materials adapt. Absolutely. But if we're using inefficient patterns, if we're fighting and pushing on tissues that don't have adaptive stress, what we're doing is we're consuming our limited recovery capacities. So if we train with the right movements, like, hey, I can't do X movement that I'm supposed to, but I can do one that delivers almost identical results that doesn't have the risk factors, or I can use a specialty bar that's actually better at getting the loading in the right place to elicit the right results. What does that mean? It means, so those other words, they sounded like, where the hell is he going with that? It means that with those same recovery capacities, I can now train more frequently or with more volume or with more load. If I do that, what happens?
You get the
Bigger,
adaptation
stronger, faster. It's that simple, right? Because you have limited capacity. You're using some of your capacity in an inefficient manner. I mean, like it's that straightforward.
And it's interesting because, you know, you developed this equipment, and for a lot of our athletes, it's even expanding the movement variations, you know, because we're so stuck on these, you know, whatever set of core movements as like, this is the full meal deal. This is the sexy movement that is in the competition or was written on the whiteboard or whatever. But you end up with people
And maybe you've got to do that at the competition, but it doesn't mean you have to have the cumulative load of that week over week, session over session over the course of the year.
Yep.
Because
And I
that
see
will eat you up and spit you out.
With your transformer bar, for instance, you know, you mentioned stuff about body types. You know, people look at a guy like Tom Platz or some top Olympic lifters with long torsos and short femurs, and you're like, oh, what an amazing squat. I'm like, well, no, they're built for that. They're built for the bar right on the neck.
Yep.
Like that's not
exactly.
You're a different build. And I've had athletes that we've used a transformer bar with who have back injuries. So like, I can't barbell back squat. And we flip the load all the way up to the front. We get them as upright as we can. Sometimes even we elevate their heels, and all of a sudden they're like, "Holy shit! I'm able to squat pain free and take the hip and the knee through a loaded range of motion that doesn't fuck me up because the back is stable there, and in those alternate positions, it doesn't have the same effect."
Yeah, but when we get stuck in these paradigms of like, well, it doesn't count unless I have a straight bar. It's like the randomness of that is just stupid. Like, how do you think I pulled off the things that I pulled off in my lifting? Like I was able to train more frequently, higher volumes, higher intensity. I got the results, right?
And it's
I knew how to recover.
Too. You know, I think athletes, you don't know what variations are going to work for you. You got to try it. You got to test and retest and see, okay, does this feel better? Does this feel worse? Do you respond to it? You know, you kind of create a greatest hits list. Like, this is my playlist of the movements I should be doing. And then you can accumulate a custom set of bars or whatever it might be. And you can start to formulate that program for yourself. You know, Chris, like a lot of folks who are, fans of strength training coaches, that they love learning, right? I think across the board, taking the courses, going to the seminars, reading the books, like that's awesome. But there is such a difference between learning and doing, right? There's a difference between knowledge and information.
Yep.
And so, there's no better way to learn than to do it yourself and do it with your athletes.
Absolutely. Like, you cannot, like, I'm definitely like in the, if you want to, put on the nerd spectrum, like I'm like very much in that realm. But if you're just going to sit there and only follow the advice of somebody that compiles the research sitting at the Starbucks and never touched a weight, like there's only so far, because you can't understand it until you do it. I could sit there and talk about how to do a water cut all day long. You could read all the research, but until you experience it, you really don't know it. Same time, you can't just go to, the gym bro that, doesn't do any sort of research, or they just have no background or interest in, that side of stuff. And it's just off of what they feel or been told. Like, right. The magic is in this realm of being thoughtful, understanding, but living and doing it. And that's how I discover, because we talked about building resilience, right? And building resilience, one of the values of that, to get stronger, you've got to step into the unknown. You've got to put yourself on the edge, right? You're on the edge of failure. When you're there, you actually have the opportunity to really understand what's working and what's not. What are those pieces from all the things that I've done all the different nuance of science or whatever different people I listen to, but in that moment, you can find, like, that's the value of, like, I don't plan on stepping on a bodybuilding show, but I want to walk through a transformation process. I actually got coached by an IFBB pro several times to just lean out as if I was going to step on stage, walk through the whole process, including the cut, the dehydrate, just so that I could experience the suffering and know what that process is like. That's how I work.
And there's no better way to learn that. I mean, you can read every
No,
book, but until you know how that feels and can see the changes in your body, we're living in the age of like online National Enquirer. Okay. It's just salacious clickbait headline after clickbait headline, especially in the realm of fitness. It's a nightmare, honestly. Because there's so much noise and garbage from people that are just regurgitating stuff that they don't really understand. They're just kind of spouting out the verbal diarrhea, but they don't get that stuff at a deep level, because that's really what it takes. Is you have to live it. And unfortunately, there's no way to get that quickly. It's going to take time, and you're going to have to fail. The best lessons are going to come from when you fail. And there's no easy pill for people. And that idea of instant gratification, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And that's why I've done the things like the grand goals. Again, like, I walk the walk. What I preach, I do. What I preach on resilience, what I preach on movement, like, I'll push to the limits and one, to test myself and know. But that is the scientific process for me as well. Like, is to live it, to demonstrate it, and learn from it.
Hell yeah. Chris, dude, it's been amazing talking to you. If you guys are out there, please check out Chris, check out his book, check out his website. Chris, where can people find you?
It's pretty easy. So my name's Duffin. If you're listening to it, it's like muffin, but with a D. Okay. ChrisDuffin.com. Or you go in the Google and you type in Chris Duffin. I'll probably pop up. You go in the social medias, you type in Chris Duffin, you're going to find me. So LinkedIn and Instagram are going to be like the two areas where I'm more active. Instagram more than the other. I'm on all the other stuff, or most of the other stuff anyway. The LinkedIn, because I do a lot of the work in that professional realm with the coaches and whatnot.
Yep.
But my website, you will see links to Build Fast Formula, which is my supplementation approaches, Barefoot Athletics, which is, if you want to know about resilience of the foot, and an often overlooked topic, like,
Chris, I know we've talked a lot about like the transformer bar. We've talked about the cambered Kabuki multi-grip bar, but there's a lot of other really cool shit that, like, the dumbbells, the barefoot train, the trap bar. Like, there's tons of cool stuff out there, and they're awesome solutions for people. So,
and then Kabuki Strength are on there. If you sign up for my email list, there should be an auto email that sends you some exclusive discounts. And I think like the free first half of my book for free or something like that. There's also a free Audible download, I think, on there. It's that if you've got to sign up for an Audible account or whatever, however that stuff works.
Online.
but anyway, that's kind of the home. There's not a lot on the site, but it's a good central hub to everything, where you can look up those different companies. And then most of the social media, like Instagram, if you go up to there's a link tree link to all those sorts of things. So I've got some pretty phenomenal stuff on recovery protocols, the best researched and comprehensive approach as it relates to peptides and how you amplify that with blood flow restriction, types of training tools, and then the developmental kind of movement work as well. That's on there in the blog.
All next level stuff. And honestly, it usually takes a person that appears to be way off the map doing stuff that is pissing other people off to really make some innovation. In 10 years, maybe this is all the norm. Maybe this has changed the face of training and recovery. And, it
already has. I mean, like, when I was doing the stuff that I was doing, like, this was 10 years ago, these were, not the norms. And now
they call them kooky training ideas until people realize it fucking works. And, and it's actually legit science and thinking behind it. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. Chris Duffin, athlete, entrepreneur, writer, inventor, and all around inspirational guy. Check his stuff out. And thank you so much for being a part of our Thundercast today.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Good talking with you.
Great to talk with you too, dude. I'll talk to you soon. All right.